Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we finish up our Unit 2 escapade of notes. So sit back, relax, and well, don't relax because you're going to have to take notes. So I don't know what I'm talking about. Let's get into it. We are on the uh, last lecture, last notes for lecture in your notebooks. Nation building in Latin America. So if you're listening to this, remember you don't need to do vocabulary words for chapter 5, lesson 3. I mistakenly put that in your vocab, but we're on to chapter 5, lesson 4. All right. So that was your warm up. Objectives: we're going to compare and contrast ways Latin American countries gained their independence, and then we're going to draw conclusions about the influence of the French and American revolutions on Latin America. So 1800, this is where we are in the world. And places have had revolutions, places have had independence movements, and places are being taken over by colonial overseers, overlords. So yellow is Spain and green is Portugal. So and then blue, you can see the little blue out here. That's where we're gonna start actually. And if you think about it, Russia owned part of Alaska. Love looking at maps. All right, true influencer. By the end of the 18th century, new political ideas stemming from the successful American Revolution were beginning to influence the Creole elites. Creoles were descendants of Europeans who were permanently settled in Latin America. They controlled land and business and were attracted to the principles of equality of all peoples in their eyes in the eyes of the law, free trade, and free press. However, they disliked the domination of their trade by Spain and Portugal, where they came from. Creole elites began to use their new ideas to denounce the rule of the Spanish and Portuguese monarchs and their peninsulares. Spain and Spanish and Portuguese officials who resided temporarily in Latin America for political and economic gain, and they then would return to their homeland. Those are peninsulares. Creole elites resented peninsulares who dominated Latin America and drained the region of its wealth. At the turn of the century, Napoleon's wars provided the Creoles with opportunity for change. So when Napoleon overthrew the monarchies of Spain and Portugal, the authority of the Spaniards and Portuguese in their colonial empires was weakened. Between 1807 and 1825, a series of revolts enabled most of Latin America to gain their independence. All right, the T, San Dominique, Domingue, as an unusual revolution occurred before any of these independent movements in Central South America began. San Domingue, or Saint Domingue, was a French sugar colony in the island of Hispaniola in the Caribbean. Life for enslaved people were forced to work there was difficult, and many plantation owners were unforgiving. In 1791, the French monarchy was failing. Remember, French Revolution. So a guy named Francois Dominique Toussaint Louverture led more than 100,000 enslaved people in Haiti in an uprising. Saint Dominique is is a French colony, Haiti, basically where Haiti is today, which was mainly a sugar colony. And harvesting sugar is very labor intensive. And if you've ever been to the Caribbean islands, it's very hot, very humid. And then you top that off with French overseers treating enslaved Africans that came from the triangular trade. It's a mixture for bad things. So this Haitian Revolution will find inspiration in the American and French revolutions that came before it. The cause of this revolution was strengthened by the Enlightenment principle of equality of all men. This idea, they argued, applied to enslaved peoples as much as it applied to the peasants of France. During a 13-year uprising, Haitian revolutionaries seized control of the western part of the island of Hispaniola. If you remember, Hispaniola is actually where Christopher Columbus was said to discover America. On January 1st, 1804, western part of Hispaniola, now called Haiti, became the first independent state of Latin America. Remember, also in 1804, that's when Napoleon came to power, or Napoleon became emperor, was 1804. So think about it. France, Haiti, French colony, French Revolution, Napoleon. Come on. All right, this is the island over here on the left side. Strong side, left side. That's Toussaint. All right, captured. So the leader of the Haitian Revolution, Toussaint Louverture, would eventually be captured by the French. He was sent to a prison in France and would die there in 1803, less than a year before Haiti would gain independence. While in prison, he will write a memoir defending his revolt against the French, saying it was time. All right, El Grito. So beginning in 1810, Mexico also experienced a revolt. The first real hero of the Mexican independence was Father Miguel Hidalgo, who was a parish priest living in a small village of Dolores, 100 miles away from Mexico City. Hidalgo had studied the French Revolution and roused the local indigenous people and mestizos, who are people of European and indigenous descent, to free themselves from the Spanish. He said, quote, in Spanish, I don't know this is what it translates to English. Will you be free? Will you make the effort to recover from the hated Spaniards the land stolen from your forefathers 300 years ago? September 16th, 1810, Hidalgo led this ill-equipped army of thousands of indigenous people and mestizos on an attack against the Spaniards. His forces were soon crushed, and a military court sentenced Hidalgo to death. However, his memory lives on, as even today, September 16th is the first day of the uprising, is Mexico's Independence Day. The role of indigenous people and mestizos in Mexico's revolt against the Spanish frightened the Creoles and Peninsulares. Afraid of the masses, they cooperated in defeating the revolutionary forces. Creoles and Peninsulares then decided to overthrow the Spanish. The conservative elites wanted an independent nation ruled by a monarch. They selected Agustin de Iturbide to set up a new government. In 1821, Mexico declared its independence from Spain, and Iturbide declared himself emperor in 1822. However, he would be deposed a year later when Mexico formally became a republic. That's Father Miguel Hidalgo. This is the, you might want to make a note of this, draw this little pyramid, because this is the pyramid of power, the pyramid scheme, the overall pyramid scheme of how Spanish society was divided. You had the Spaniards, you had the Criollos or Creoles, who are offspring of the Spaniards born in America. You have mestizos, who are people of mixed European and indigenous ancestries. Then you have the mulattoes, who are mixed European and African ancestries. You have the Zambos, which are mixed indigenous and African ancestries. You have the indigenous, and then you have the Africans, who are slaves. That's Agustin de Iturbide. All right, Jose y Simon. Jose de San Martin of Argentina and Simon Bolivar of Venezuela, both members of the Creole elite, were hailed as the liberators of South America. Bolivar began the struggle against for Venezuelan independence in 1810. He also will lead revolts in New Granada, currently Colombia, and Ecuador. By 1819, these countries had formed Gran Colombia. By 1810, San Martin had liberated Argentina from Spanish authority. 1817, he will lead his forces over the Andes Mountains to attack the Spanish in Chile. The journey was an amazing feat, although 2/3 of the pack of mules and horses died during the trip that they used. Soldiers also suffer from the lack of oxygen because the higher you go up, the less oxygen there is in elevation, and the severe cold while crossing the mountains more than 2 miles above sea level, mountain passes. The arrival of San Martin's forces in Chile completely surprised the Spanish rulers there. As a result, they were badly defeated at the Battle of Chacabuco, February 12, 1817. Chile declared its independence in 1818. By 1821, San Martin moved on Lima, Peru, the center of Spanish authority in South America. Spain was convinced that he could, San Martin was convinced that he could not complete the liberation of Peru alone, so he welcomed Simón Bolívar and his forces for the help. Bolívar is considered the liberator of Venezuela, took on the task of crushing the last significant Spanish army forces at Ayacucho in December 9th, 1824. That is Jose de San Martin. That's Simón Bolívar. That was Latin America in 1800 on the left, and on the right is after the independence movements, the fight for independence. So, all right, aftermath. So by the end of 1824, Peru, Uruguay, Paraguay, Colombia, Venezuela, Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile had become free of Spanish rule. Earlier in 1822, the Prince Regent of Brazil had declared Brazil's independence from Portugal, and the Central American states had become independent in 1823 and 1839, divided into 5 republics: Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Nicaragua. All right. Problemas de Independencia. So in the early 1820s, one major threat remained to these new independence of the Latin American states. Members of the Concert of Europe had favored using troops to restore Spanish rule in Latin America. The British, who wished to trade with Latin America, disagreed. They proposed joint action with the U.S. and against any European moves in Latin America. Distrustful of these British moves, James Monroe, the President of the United States, acted alone in 1823. In his declaration called the Monroe Doctrine, test question, he stated that the Americas, South, Central, and North, were off limits to any colonization efforts, and he strongly warned any European intervention in the Americas. So basically saying America is closed for business. More importantly, to Latin American independence was the words than American words was the British Navy, however. Other European powers feared the British Navy, which stood between Latin America and any planned European invasion force. The new Latin American nations faced a number of serious problems in 1830 to 1870. The wars for independence resulted in a staggering loss of people, property, and livestock, and during the course of the 19th century, Latin American nations would be economically dependent on Western nations once again. So that's Uncle Sam. All right, HelloFresh. Most of the new nations in Latin America began with Republican governments, but they had no experience of self-rule. Soon after independence, strong leaders known as Caudillos gained power. Caudillos ruled chiefly by military force and were usually supported by the landed elite. Usually supported by the landed elites. Many kept their new national states together, while some modernizers who built roads, canals, ports, and schools were while others were destructive. Mexican General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna ruled Mexico from 1833 to 1855. He misused state funds, halted reforms, and created chaos. In 1835, American settlers in the Mexican state of Tejas revolted against Santa Anna's rule. Texas gained independence in 1836 and U.S. statehood in 1845. But you're going to hear about that next year in U.S. history. War started between Mexico and the U.S. from 1846 to 1848, and Mexico was defeated and will lose 1/2 of its territory to the U.S., the Mexican Cession. Fortunately for Mexico, Santa Anna's disastrous rule was followed by a period of reform from 1855 to 1876 under the leadership of Benito Juarez. Juarez was a national hero and son of Native American peasants, brought liberal reforms to Mexico, including separation of church and state, land distribution to the poor, and educational system of all for Mexico. That's him. That's Santa Anna, my bad. Looks like Simon Bolivar. And then that's the Benito Juarez. All right, land equals power. You're gonna need to know that quote. More land you have, the more power you have. So other caudillos like Juan Manuel de Rosas in Argentina was supported by the masses. These leaders became extremely popular and brought about radical change in their countries. Unfortunately, the caudillo's authority depended on his personal power. When they died or lost power, civil wars for control often erupted. A fundamental problem of all Latin American nations was the domination of society by the landed elites. Large estates remained one way of life in Latin America by 1848. One such example, the Sanchez Navarro family in Mexico possessed 17 estates that made up 16 million acres. Talk about land inequality. Land remained the basis of wealth, social prestige, and political power throughout the 19th century. Landed elites ran governments, controlled the courts, and kept a system of inexpensive labor. These landowners made enormous profits by growing single cash crops like coffee for exports. And most of the population had no land to grow basic food, crops, and as a result, the masses experienced dire poverty. And that's, what's his name? Juan Manuel de Rosas. That's a mural of the Navarro family. All right, SDD. If you know what that means, Call of Duty. So political independence brought about economic independence, but old patterns were quickly reestablished. Instead of Spain and Portugal, Great Britain now dominated Latin American economy. British merchants moved into Latin America and British investors poured in funds. Old trade relationships reemerged. Latin America continued to serve as a source of raw materials and foodstuffs for the industrial nations of Europe and USA. Exports included wheat, tobacco, wool, sugar, coffee, and hides. At the same time, Latin American countries imported finished consumer goods, especially textiles, and had limited industry themselves. The emphasis on exporting raw materials and importing finished products ensured the ongoing domination of the Latin American economy by foreigners. Latin American countries will remain economically dependent on Western nations, even though they were no longer colonies. Poor guys. And that is it. Well. Need to stop sharing. Oh, here's my dog, Abby, that I've been holding for this entire lecture because she'll bark. Hi, Abby. Say hi to class. Hi, class. All right, go off. Be faithful. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. So if you heard any of that sound in the background, because I was trying to hold her. Anyways, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. A little special sneak peek surprise for you all at the end if you stayed. I got to see my dog. Anyways, Latin America, they got independence and then they got redominated. So that's the long story short of it. So yeah, your homework is page 201, chapter 5, lesson 4, review questions 2 through 4, 2, 3, and 4. All right. And hey, we're done. So now you can finish off your KWL charts, finish off your vocab, and get ready for your test coming up soon. And yeah, hopefully you guys did enjoy that. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.